So the way we add server-side rendering to our Ember app is you just install an Ember add-on, and it's called Ember CLI Fastboot. And the way you run your Ember app in Fastboot mode, right? This is starting a Fastboot server up locally in Node.js, running it, generating the HTML to send over HTTP to your browser. The way you start that up is Ember fastboot -- serve -assets. Serving the assets is important because really Fastboot's only job is to build HTML. It does not care about style sheets or images or anything like that. Those are just references in the HTML to stuff. It does care about JavaScript, but the Fastboot build for the app is different than the browser-ready build for the app. So when you're building your app, when you're like deploying it to Heroku, you're making two things. You're making the thing for running in Node.js and the thing to send to the browser. And a clear example of where they're different is there is no AJAX in Node.js. There is this library that's called request, right? There's a node request that you can make. And that is not available in browser land. And so there are these subtle differences that kind of have to be swapped out in order to make it so that you have something that can run in each place. Typically, when we're building our app, we want to build on things that abstract those differences away from us. In production, so there's an official Node.js server called Fastboot App Server, and it acts as an Express middleware, but you could, in all likelihood, use it with anything else without too much work. You could use it with Koa or whatever node serving technology you wish to employ. So a typical setup would mean bringing this library in, Fastboot App Server, and then layering on top of that your HTTP to HTTPS, redirect logic, and anything else that you may need there in terms of, potentially it's serving up an asset or two. Maybe you need to serve up like one other JSON file that is not going to be on a CDN, but it's sort of compose your own asset serving layer with this as the core thing. The major challenge in terms of enabling Fastboot on your app is making sure that you understand the differences in capabilities. So Fastboot, because there's no DOM in Node.js, there's no window object, there's no document object, we have built a library called SimpleDOM, which is an extremely lightweight subset of the DOM API that is optimized for exactly what we're using, exactly what we need Fastboot to do. So building up subtrees and walking and traversing nodes to make sure that all of the stuff Ember needs to do internally is really fast. Because it's not a complete implementation, and this is done deliberately for performance reasons, there are libraries that won't find what they need. jQuery is an example. jQuery needs a pretty complete DOM implementation, and it does not play nice with SimpleDOM. So when you're rendering on the server, there is no window object, there is no navigator object, there is no document global. There are no globals, only this Fastboot global, which is something that it adds. And it does this, it essentially sandboxes the building of the app so that it is contained and only has access to what you intend for it to have access to. So a common pattern to follow in terms of dealing with things that only work in the browser is to find a node equivalent, and it may be a different library, right? And then building a common abstraction on top of that. So a facade that will go in one direction for the browser and one direction for Node. A great example of this is the fetch polyfill. So everyone knows what fetch is? It's like the new AJAX, sort of, but a little bit more powerful. So it's a new way of retrieving data. It's a web standard. The fetch polyfill that we use in Ember has a different thing that it does in the browser versus when rendering in Fastboot. So in terms of making the determination when you're going through something like an initializer or you're going through your Ember CLI build, sometimes you need to be able to tell whether you're building for Fastboot or building for the browser, or you're running for Fastboot or running in the browser. So we use guards in order to determine which environment you happen to be in. So when you're running, you're going to basically check to see if this Fastboot global is defined. And if it is defined, you're in Fastboot mode, and if it's not, you're doing client-side stuff. So if Fastboot is undefined, browser land. If Fastboot is defined, you're doing a Fastboot stuff. Sorry, I will update this slide just to be clear. Browser on the top, Fastboot on the bottom. The words client-side next to Fastboot are a little misleading, but that is running the app, right? That is not building the app. So when we're building the app, we look for this Node.js global, right? So any building is done in Node. And if we see that it's undefined, Ember CLI Fastboot as an environment variable is undefined, we know that we're building for the browser. Otherwise, we're building for Fastboot. And if you're curious, it's equal to the string true if you're building for Fastboot. Now, it's important to do this because sometimes you need to drop a library that would cause Fastboot to crash through needing more of the DOM API than we have.